All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is a Thursday, and we're calling this show, I guess, David French gets almost everything wrong. And I considered using the term despicable in the title of this program as a description of Mr. French, but I decided not to go in that direction. I want to be too, I don't know, scurrilous, maybe, is that the right word? I'm not sure. Too insulting, right? I mean, and some of the things that French writes are actually kind of accurate, or they're actually accurate, period. They are accurate. So despicable implies, just totally beneath contempt. And he may be, I mean, there's caping clearly, there's excuses made for genocide. I think if somebody started making excuses for the Nazis, and it's not just excuses, I mean, it's justification, it's empathizing with Israel's supposed challenges, the difficulties Israel faces, rather than centering the victims, the Palestinians. But we center victims here on Halitics, and we'll start as we do, as we have been doing for years now, with the tragedy of Gaza, the war crime in Gaza, the war crimes, the genocide, whatever you want to term, there's limited language, has only so much power, capability. This is the headline from NBC News. Just a few minutes before airtime, Israeli strikes kill at least 100 in Gaza. The status of 3 living hostages remains uncertain. So apparently they're saying there's only 3 hostages still alive. I didn't realize it was that low a number, but it certainly belies any claim. I mean, the recent deaths and reported deaths of hostages belies, I believe, any claim that Israel's motivated, that Netanyahu is motivated by a desire to liberate the hostages, that the wholesale devastation, the razing of Gaza, the sowing of fields with salt in Gaza is somehow a legitimate effort to free the hostages. The headline there from NBC News does also kind of, I guess, make clear the challenge I face trying to give you accurate death counts, accurate murder counts, because there's not like a set 24-hour period that the news media relies on to say you will often get there were this many deaths, 59 deaths in the last 24 hours, but there's never a clear-cut definition of what that 24-hour period is. So I may eschew, at least to a degree, a precise number. Now, if I get a precise number in a story, I'll use it, but I may eschew to a degree a precise number of deaths when I'm reporting as we move forward. And the hope, of course, is that it stops, right? It stops. From NBC News story, where they report at least 100 deaths over the past few hours. Bodies of young children could be seen lying among the dead at Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City, in footage taken by the NBC News crew on the ground. Well, I didn't know they had news on the ground there, but I guess that's better than if they don't. Shortly after strikes rained down, one woman said her grandson had been killed. Why are they killing us? She said, there are no rockets here, no fighters, no food, no water, nothing. So that's the reality in Gaza. That's as NBC News is reporting it contemporaneously today. No food, no water, nothing, and no fighters there either, where Israel is simply launching attacks. I have here close to 53,000. Their numbers bounce around a little bit. We had somewhere in the 52,600 range yesterday. So I'm bumping that up to close to 53,000 with 100 plus additional deaths through this morning. And maybe we'll get a more accurate claim tomorrow. Again, this is somewhat round. They're round numbers. They're not precise by any means. And again, we know that the The true count is almost certainly much, much higher than anything we can come up with the media. The Ministry of Health there can come up with. The true death count is almost certainly significantly higher. We have for Trump and Netanyahu since March 18th, about 2,800 dead. And obviously the entire number of dead can be laid at Netanyahu's feet. He needs to be tried for war crimes. I don't think there's really any, at this point, any real doubt, any real argument to the contrary. Please do click subscribe. Yeah, there's a real nice blue and white square, the bottom right of your YouTube screen. If you're watching on YouTube, click like, click, just show us a little love. That's all we ask for here at Halitics. Got a little love from Arlen. He liked my video from yesterday where I went into greater detail, the story in Oakdale, California, dating back to June 2020, the June 4, June 6, two rallies, or one rally, one abortive rally that the New York Times reported in. Went into quite a bit of detail in that video yesterday, reporting on what Arlen and I had first discussed Tuesday. So he liked, I guess, what we did. I appreciate that very much, Arlen. Thank you so much for your kind words. Don't forget, join us on Facebook. You can continue the debate there anytime, the discussion there. Halitics on Facebook. Super easy to find. And I did mention the New York Times because I guess it's the week, right, to go after the New York Times, or at least stories in the New York Times, and find reasons to criticize them, challenge them. So let's get right to it with David French. That won't be the whole program, by the way, not at all. I've got several other stories I want to get into, but might as well lead with this because we do center to such a degree, far more pretty much than any other, than any other host, right? What's going on in Gaza and Israel. I think I'm probably I center that tragedy to a greater degree than maybe just about any other YouTuber of whom I am aware. So we'll do that, but we have some other stories too, and I really want to get into this. So French, there's no New York Times columnist. It's extraordinary to me that people still look at this paper with such high regard. There's no New York Times columnist who's just unabashedly critical of Israel, who just says this is wrong what Israel's doing. They all make, and there are several who are cheerleaders, who are defenders of Israel, most notably French, and I think even worse, Bret Stephens. And where are the liberals? Where's the Gail Collins? Where's Krugman retired, the Tom Friedmans? All of them make excuses for Israel. Not one has called it a genocide. I guess Michelle Goldberg has been willing to criticize Israel to a degree, but it's certainly not her focus. Not one of them questions the basic legitimacy of a theocracy, of a nation that's based on religion. Not one of the New York Times columnists does that. And to me, that's a fundamental betrayal of reason, of their readers, of their audience, of truth. Now, if you want to take the argument, I was talking to a friend of mine over the weekend, a close friend of mine, very close friend, and we had this very debate. And the argument that they made was, we need Israel. There needs to be a Jewish state because Jews can never be safe unless there's a Jewish state. And he went on to point out that as long as there's the Jewish state, Jews anywhere who are being persecuted can flee to Israel. But of course, that's not true. If a country imprisons its Jews, if it cracks down on them, if it puts them in concentration camps, then they can't escape. They're locked in. It's what Israel's doing to the Palestinians. So that's part of the issue. Now, a response might be, well, if Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia opened, laid out the welcome mat, then the Palestinians could go there. Maybe they could. Maybe Israel let some go. Maybe they wouldn't. They've been remarkably difficult in terms of any type of humanitarian treatment of Palestinians. So it's not clear. Presumably they would allow them to leave because then they can occupy Gaza, which is apparently their goal, which seems to be at least part of their goal. But we don't know. They might say, well, we don't know. There's a lot of terrorists. A lot of those Gazans are terrorists. We can't let them go. So Jews wouldn't necessarily be safe because of the state of Israel. That doesn't necessarily guarantee our protection. In fact, I think many of us are less safe because people are conflating Judaism with Israel, and their hatred of Israel therefore extends to Jews. So I don't accept the premise to begin with. But even if it were true, even if there was a legitimate argument, or there is a legit, I don't ultimately find it persuasive, but even if there was a legitimate argument that a Jewish state is critical to guarantee some measure of security for Jewish people, I'd still say that's not a good enough reason to have it. Theocracies aren't acceptable. There should be a country there. It's a geographical region. It could be a model. It would have been beautiful if in 47, 48, the people in the region, Jews, Muslims, Christians, had agreed, had united and said, hey, we're going to make a model state where we all have religious freedom, where we all can live in peace, where we guarantee everyone enough and no one has too much. We're going to have kibbutzim. We're going to make the desert bloom. But those kibbutzim aren't going to be just Jewish. We'll have Muslims. We'll have Palestinians. We'll have Christians. Those kibbutzim will be multi-ethnic, multi-religious. That could have been, that's the dream, right? That is the beautiful dream. And if you want to say, well, Jews can't be safe without their own homeland, then that can be the homeland for refugees everywhere, for oppressed peoples everywhere can look to Israel. Just as many have in the past looked to the United States. So that to me would be the beautiful dream for Israel, as opposed to the nightmare that we now have. David French, does he get everything wrong? No, but he gets a lot wrong. Israel has a terrible choice to make. First of all, starting with his framing of the issue, which is to center the oppressor. Now, it's true, they have far more power, so I guess they're the ones who get to make the choice. But the framing is that Israel is the one that has to make a decision with respect to itself. What's best for Israel, not what's best for the Palestinian people. And French is saying, hey, unfortunately, poor Israel is stuck between options, none of which are good. Not Israel made its bed. It created a terrible, terrible environment where it's roundly reviled and legitimately so viewed as an outlaw state by much of the world, correctly, I might add, and has created tens of millions of enemies worldwide. But that's not how French frames it. He frames it as Israel has to do the right thing, even though it doesn't really have any good options available to it. So very poor framing. It starts right at the beginning that this is all about Israel's response to the October 7 attack at the Nova Music Festival by Hamas. Not, okay, Hamas represents an oppressed people, a people that have been kept and are being kept and have been kept in concentration camps, both in Gaza and, well, Hamas doesn't represent the West Bank, but the Palestinian people who are both in the West Bank or on the West Bank or in the West Bank and in Gaza are being oppressed. They're being kept in ever more constricted spaces by Israel. And Palestinians in Israel itself are being attacked, are treated as second-class citizens who don't have full representation anywhere near it in the Knesset. That's how French should frame it. Israel's bad behavior over the years has created a tremendous security risk. And it's going to be very hard to, if at all possible, short of, again, not dismantling Israel, but creating a true democracy of where all are citizens, would be the only way to make it secure. But that is, again, not French's take. And it's not the take of any New York Times columnist. To me, this casts grave doubt on any kind of authoritativeness the newspaper might claim. That said, yes, the reporters do a good job by and large and cover a lot of stories, but they don't cover them in ways that may conflict directly with the newspaper's ideology. So in response to the attack on October 7, according to French, the government has pursued two primary war aims. First, Israel wanted to secure the return of every hostage Hamas seized. Well, we know that's false. That's just completely false. That has not been their aim whatsoever. And second, Israel wanted to destroy Hamas. And I would argue that's also false. But we're seeing this authoritative piece by this neocon French, who's supposed to be some kind of an expert in foreign policy. And he gets it completely wrong. Obviously, Israel hasn't had, and it's interesting the way he says secure the return, not the safe return, not to preserve as many lives as possible, but just the return. So if we get the bodies in a bag, well, that's their return, I suppose. Regardless, we know how Israel did get hostages back early in the months following October 7. There was a ceasefire and a number of hostages were returned safely. During the Trump-Witkoff ceasefire early this year, a number of hostages were returned safely to Israel. It's only when the hostilities instigated by Israel, pushed by Israel, have the hostages been killed. That's when they're being killed, sometimes by Israel itself, often by Israel, or starved by Israel, if not shot or blown up. So French's framing is clearly wrong. It's dishonest. That's not the goal. Second, Israel wanted to destroy Hamas. I don't think that is the goal, right? I don't see that. If that were the goal, again, their behavior would be very, very different. By clearly, eradicating Palestine, by destroying it, by razing it to the ground, Israel's empowering Hamas. I mean, they're destroying the country, but the people who are being beset, who are seeing their children killed, their parents killed, they're going to embrace the most extreme, the most aggressive, the most warlike representatives, those who are prepared to do anything possible to kill Israelis. So obviously, Israel's aims are clearly not what French says. He gets it wrong because he's defending the country. He doesn't want to say, no, what they're really trying to do is eradicate Gaza altogether. Probably kill every Gazan, because then they're deluded into, I guess, believing they'll never have to fear from Gaza again. But obviously, they're going to be cousins. They're going to be co-religionists who will not take this lying down, and they're going to do whatever they can do to avenge the losses. So French, wrong, just wrong. And it's very, again, problematic that this is in, something that's so clearly false is in the newspaper record. People take, if it's written in the New York Times, if the people are going to take it seriously. And that's a problem. French goes out of his way to defend what Israel's doing. He claims that he acknowledges, right? He acknowledges how terrible the killing has been there, right? He doesn't deny it, but he defends, he excuses it, and he blames, as is the wont of every Israeli defender, he blames Hamas. He finds ways to put the blame on Hamas rather than where it belongs, the people dropping the bombs, the people manufacturing the bombs. So he doesn't get it all wrong. Some facts are correct. Thousands of innocent Palestinian civilians have died, including an enormous number of women and children. It's very antiseptically written. It's somehow there's not the outrage. I don't read this. Look, just the facts, ma'am, right? You don't need outrage. You don't need to manufacture it. It's so horrific. The facts. That's all you really need, right? To just say, wait, what the hell's going on? Thousands have died? Innocent people, women, children. There's an impossible existence right now. Threats in every direction, whether it's from the Israeli military. He calls it defense forces. Obviously, they're not defense. And starvation. And then there's this brutal Hamas rule. And where's I'd love to know why, maybe it's true. We always hear how terrible Hamas is, but what's the proof? What's the evidence that Hamas is so awful? He comes on, at least to Palestinians. French continues. The civilian deaths aren't because of Israel. They're because Hamas embeds itself illegally in the civilian population. It's interesting. What Hamas does, according to French, is illegal. But bombing hospitals, schools, refugee camps, which is clearly illegal. He doesn't use that term to describe Israel's actions. You get such a dishonest, false impression of what's happening there if you read David French. I was going to say, again, is this despicable? I didn't want to use that term. I don't know, maybe YouTube wouldn't like it if I had I looked up the term despicable. Well, what it means is really beneath contempt, the worst possible thing you can do. And maybe this is despicable. It's pretty close, right? Where you make excuses for what Israel's doing. They have to get rid of Hamas. They're trying to get the hostages back. They're trying to get those hostages back. Of course, it's okay. Is that despicable? To say that? To use the hostages as an excuse for genocide? And it's such a transparently false excuse, right? Because they're not. Israel's actions are not securing anybody's release. They're securing thousands and thousands and thousands of deaths, including many of the hostages. So is it despicable for David French, who presumably knows better, to claim this? I didn't want to use the word in the title. I didn't want to put in the thumbnail. I didn't want to, raise hackles in YouTube algorithms that review these videos. But I also, frankly, was a little uncomfortable. Well, maybe it really isn't quite despicable. Maybe it's just really, really bad. He does acknowledge, I guess you get something for this. We're so desperate for a bone on the, pro-peace left, the pro-life left, were so desperate for that little tiny acknowledgement from the establishment that just saying, yeah, there have been a lot of deaths, a lot of civilian deaths, children's deaths, can seem like a concession, when really it's not. When really it's not. All right, 240-242-5646. So the reality, right, the reality he describes, French, is a hell on earth. He describes another Holocaust. That's what we're all seeing. That's what we all observe. And yet, the reality is rendered antiseptic by his allegation that it's about Hamas. Israel has inflicted significant losses on Hamas and destroyed its offensive capacity, according to French, but they still maintain hold over the civilian population. You see that kind of bait and switch there? The actions by Israel now, they're not just, yeah, they're about the hostages, which we know is completely belied by the actions, right? What Israel's done has led to more and more hostage deaths. If their goal was liberation for the hostages, they've done just the opposite. They've killed the hostages. Israel has. Its actions have led to the death, and very foreseeably the deaths of the hostages. That's just without doubt. But the way that this is framed by French is not just that Israel has these good intentions. Well, we want to save the hostages, we want to get rid of Hamas, and why wouldn't we? They're murderous, they're terrorists, they're evil. But it's also not just to protect Israel, but look, Hamas is this criminal organization that maintains its hold over the civilians there. So we're really trying to liberate Palestine. That's what Israel's trying to do, according to David French. We're really trying to free Palestine from the grip of these horrible Hamas terrorists. Well, if that's their goal, then I would ask, why don't you take your jackboot off the throat of Palestine? Why don't you start working with the authorities there to make life tolerable in Palestine? Why don't you start integrating Palestine into Israel? I guarantee you the extremism will fade as a sense of decency, normalcy, continuity in life comes back. But what Israel's doing is just every day more destabilization, more death, more destruction. This is the most fertile ground you could ever create for a terrorist organization, if indeed that is the be-all and end-all of Hamas. I find these articles so problematic, so troubling, because so many people read them and they take them seriously. They take this clear BS seriously. And it makes the job of trying to ultimately build, a solution, to build a political movement for peace, it becomes so much more difficult. Because an influencer like French or an influencer like Bret Stephens, the New York Times, it's over and over, day after day, telling its readers, yeah, maybe Israel's gone a little too far here and there, but it's understandable. They were attacked. They're just trying to protect themselves. They are just trying to defeat this terrorist group. They want their hostages back. So yeah, it's regrettable. A few lives are lost, but what choice does Israel have? That's the argument that you get from the New York Times and from establishment media. And that argument is accepted. It's lapped up by so many, which makes the task of building a true pro-life, pro-peace movement so much more challenging. It's the same trying to build an alternative to the Democratic Republicans. If media everywhere is telling you the Democrats are our only hope, your only option, that they're really good people, that even the far left, the rump of the Democratic Party, the AOCs and the Ilhan Omars, who are hardly radical in any way, but if you're told over and over, that's as far left as anyone would even consider going in this country, then the idea that we can build a humane, reasonably honest party that has integrity, that we could do that, we could step outside this duopoly, becomes a virtually insurmountable task. So that's why this stuff just drives me absolutely bats. It's crazy. Just so wrong. So what Brooks, or rather French, I confuse him with David Brooks. I guess Brooks isn't bad now. What Brooks is now calling for is occupation. He's saying, yeah, Israel needs to go in and take over completely Gaza. And if it does that with the goal of permanent occupation, that would be a crime against humanity. So that's the crime against humanity, maybe, if that's their goal, which is interesting. All the excess deaths that he describes, the killing of children, women, civilians, that's not starvation, right? Starvation. That's not a crime against humanity. French, permanent displacement, yes, that we agree. But everything else, it seems like it's okay with you. So it's a straw person argument. It's like, hey, Israel should go in. We want them to now occupy Gaza, just as long as they're going to leave at some point. Otherwise, it would be a crime against humanity. Everything else to date isn't, that Israel's done, but at some point it would be. And of course, if you accept that, and you accept the assurances or the kind of the whispers and winks and nudges from Netanyahu that, oh yeah, of course, we don't want to permanently occupy Gaza. We don't want to take it over. We don't want to make it part of greater Israel. Then when that happens, you're like, well, it's kind of too late now. Wish I could help. Brooks, French, there are two Davids, David French. French wants Israel to go in there and kind of clean it up. And he analogizes, and when you read this, you start to think, is he just stupid, right? Is David French just stupid? If you're the editor, and I get it, they give these op-ed writers a tremendous amount of freedom. They virtually never step on them. They never tell them you have to write this or that. I get it. You never should have made David French an op-ed writer in the first place. But once you did, you have a lot of trouble. So maybe you make some suggestions. He doesn't want to accept them. He doesn't. Here's the answer. Get Medea Benjamin. Put her on your op-ed page. Find someone who's a real pro-life activist, advocate. Put them on your op-ed page. Shama Sawan. There's somebody, I don't always agree with Shama, but she's takes on the duopoly like nobody's business. Have somebody who's calling overtly for alternatives to the Republican Democrats on your page there. Why don't you do that? How about David Cobb, my old Green Party buddy? He'd be a great person to be on your op-ed page. Butch Ware, Dr. Ware from the latest Green Party ticket. Clearly, we're being disturbed. So Brooks says, hey, I was in Iraq. I went to Iraq. I was a journalist. I went there. I was embedded with troops. And I saw the right way to handle an occupation. Never mind, we never should have been in Iraq. We were there under false pretenses. We basically destroyed the country. But you know what we did? We stood up regions. We went into an area, and rather than just killing people, We entered villages, took them from al-Qaeda, and stayed until we could stand up local allies to maintain peace, security. Then we moved to the next town. Of course, it's been 18 years since then, French, and the country is still extremely unsafe. It's still destabilized. There's no real security in Iraq. That war that W launched under completely false pretenses. Remember what? It was the yellow cake uranium, which was a hoax. There was no evidence. It was false. Iraq wasn't trying to get uranium for some nascent or actually existent nuclear program. That was false. It was false. Iraq was completely not involved in 9/11. And yet there were whispers all the way through. Maybe Iraq had a hand in 9/11. We destroy the country, one of the more actually moderate Arab leaders, at least in terms of the way he governed, wasn't a theocracy in Iraq. We destroy that country. And it's still, despite all those wonderful efforts that UN and were involved in, French, it's still not safe. Still not. Just like Syria's a friggin' nightmare right now. Just getting rid of Assad has been disastrous for Syria. Get the hell out, Israel. Just get out of there. Get your troops out. Start paying to rebuild. Bring in humanitarian. That's the only answer. It's not one you get from French. It's the only. All right, I mentioned David Cobb. He is a good friend of Hal. He's also a friend of Halitics. We had him on very early on. I had some problems with the recording, unfortunately, but I saw this post from David, and I wanted to share it because this is the kind of sentiment that is very prevalent, I think, among many of us on the left, is this feeling that the political system is broken, we cannot rely on it, it will not suffice, it will not avail. We cannot avail ourselves of it in a way that will lead to kinds of change that we know we need, especially in a time of ecocide, genocide, extraordinary income and wealth inequality, both intra and internationally. So Cobb posts this. From that moment on, I was no longer a liberal. This is the historian Zinn. Yeah. Is it David Zinn? He wrote History of the American People. I got to go figure that one out because Howard Zinn. There's Howard Zinn. Let me blow that up a little bit. So there's Howard Zinn. I was a radical. I was no longer a liberal. A believer in the self-correcting character of American democracy. I was a radical, believing that something fundamental was wrong in this country, something rotten at the root. The situation required not just a new president or new laws, but an uprooting of the old order, the introduction of a new kind of society, cooperative, peaceful, egalitarian. So I agree with him that we need to uproot the old order. And I also agree with him that we need that new kind of society, cooperative, peaceful, egalitarian. Now, humans have in our genes our genes tell us to be cooperative, peaceful, and egalitarian. And they also tell us to be aggressive, to be selfish, and to be uncooperative when it suits us. So there's both. I mean, we're everything. We're all of those things. We're not just one or the other. I responded to this because I don't know what the point is about calling yourself, saying a liberal is someone who believes in the self-correcting character of American democracy. I don't think that's how liberals think. I don't, frankly, call myself a liberal anymore. I used to. I never was a big believer in the self-correcting character. I think liberals make certain assumptions and they have certain values. I think when I got into a debate back in California with Brad Friedman, I said, Being a liberal means you believe in certain things. You believe in health care. You believe in Medicare for all. That, to me, is liberal. That's a liberal solution. It's not neoliberal. And, liberal means different things in the United States and elsewhere. But ultimately, it's a commitment, I think, it is a commitment to voting, to democracy. It doesn't mean you like or believe that we even have a democracy right now. Blog made a point which I think was a fair one, because he was arguing, no, liberalism is old, it's stale, it's tired. I think Blog's point was more liberals believe in big government, right? They believe that government programs, government involvement is critical to redress the problems that society has. And he was not really having that. He was saying government can solve problems, but also create more problems. I think there is truth to that, in the sense that I think liberal does mean you believe in big government, like an LBJ with a Great Society, which was really good, right? I mean, a lot of really good things came out of the Great Society, were really important. But I also think it's fair to say, hey, if we can create certain kind of mechanisms to just automatically nothing will automatically redistribute wealth, but very high taxes. And then you sort of step back. You say, we're going to take a lot of money from the wealthy, and we're going to see how the market works when no one gets super rich, where no one can take advantage of their privileges and their status to make themselves ever richer and more powerful at everyone else's expense. That's critical. You need to do that. We're going to use government to guarantee that everyone has enough, and also, to break up big companies and all that. But still, maybe we're going to not look to government to solve every problem. I'm willing to do that, but when we identify problems, we need to solve them. When not addressing a problem doesn't lead to its solution, we need to fix it. I have no problem with being called a liberal, as long as being a liberal doesn't mean I support Kamala Harris. As long as being a liberal doesn't mean I support AOC. I make assumptions about how society should work, and I think those are liberal assumptions. I think the people who are called liberal today aren't really liberal. I think they're neoliberal. I think they're neocon. I think they're hustlers, fakers, dishonest. I have a problem with the way Zinn frames liberals as people who believe in the self-correcting character of American democracy. That's never been my understanding of what a liberal is. And my bigger concern even than that is, yes, you're right. We do need to radically reshape society. We need to take power and wealth away from the warmongers and the tech bros and all that, of course. But how are you going to do that without politics? And that's my ultimate response. Are you saying, Howard Zinn, that our political system can't allow us to make essential change? That may be the case. But then what are you calling for instead? A revolution, a violent takeover of the country? Maybe that's what we need. I'm not going to say we don't. I can't believe that's going to lead to necessarily a better outcome. And I know, besides through politics, I don't see any way of bringing about the essential changes needed. I listed, end genocide, address the climate crisis, redistribute wealth, income, and power globally without electing good people. I don't know how we can change this. I understand people talk about community action. We have food drives. We empower each other, self-help. Come on. Self-help. People can barely help themselves. How are they going to help others? The billionaires have scarfed up, vacuumed up, hoovered up so much. We've got to take from them. And how are you going to do that? You can kill someone like Luigi Mangione did, right? And a lot of people like it and they support him. But even if he's acquitted, let's say he's acquitted, If I was on the jury, I'd probably vote to acquit Luigi, even if the evidence were clear and incontrovertible. I would be inclined to probably vote to acquit Luigi Mangione. I think it's a justifiable homicide to kill the CEO of a healthcare company. I really do. I mean, it's certainly understandable. But I see that. I get it. But it's not going to change anything anyway. It's not going to make things any better. It won't. Only if we elect Jill Stein. If we'd elected Bernie Sanders in 2016, things could be a lot better now. I don't see an alternative to politics. As bad as our system is, as designed as it is to prevent our wishes from being enacted into law, to disregard everyday people at every juncture, as designed as well as it functions to do that, what else have you got? Some would say, well, what else do we have with the Democratic Party? I'd say, well, no, we have to go in a different direction because the Democratic Party isn't changeable. But maybe, just maybe, we can elect people if we band together, if we unite. And we have means to unite ourselves, right? With shows like this, videos like this. Presumably some progressive organizations like DSA could show the way, lead the way. They haven't. The Green Party, Workers Strike Back. I don't know what else we got. Just one more point, because I said, hey, some will say, listen to me, and they'll say, well, yeah, we do. We have to rely on politics. The Democrats stink, but they're all we got. There's no other alternative. I hear that over and over. I get why you don't like the Democrats, but we can't build. It's too hard. It's too hard. Here's why we have to. So this is from Nicole Shanahan. I don't know who she is. Some sort of a new influencer. I guess she posts a lot buys ads or something on Facebook. She's some sort of a Texas, I guess. It's Tech Bro, Texas. I think she's from somewhere out there in California, or that's where she lives now, whatever. So she's very critical here of RFK Jr. as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. She says it's strange to her because apparently I was totally unaware of this. There's these two siblings, Callie and Casey, who are self-help type gurus, like Marianne Williamson types, except they're right-wing instead of whatever she is, I guess. Friend of Oprah's, I don't know, whatever they are. So these two siblings, Callie and Casey, are apparently now big shots, and they're getting nominated for, Surgeon General or something like that. I don't really even know. And it's kind of a joke. They're not qualified. They don't know anything about medicine. They promote, just snake oil. And Shanahan says, I thought they weren't, we were promised they wouldn't be this brother-sister team, Callie and Casey. They wouldn't be. We were promised they wouldn't be the ones making the decisions. And now it looks like not only that, RFK Jr. is taking orders from people, and it's not even Trump, who at least has he at least was elected, so he should be the one giving orders under democracy. But he's not. So what the hell's going on with RFK Jr.? This is really a problem. There's something really weird about those two, the two brother and sister, Cal and Casey. So I don't know anything about them. Obviously, I'm, except that they're self-help gurus. They're not real. They don't practice medicine. Obviously, it's a joke. But, but when Shanahan says, well, we were promised this and we're getting that. Yeah. But Republicans did promise some good things in 2024, right? Trump said he was going to push for peace in Ukraine. And to a degree, he has done that. He's been incredibly corrupt, but he did promise tariffs. We sort of got those, I guess. They're a good thing. What did the Democrats promise us? Why do you think we need another party? What did Harris promise us? More of the same. Genocide. She did. She said, I'm never going to stop supporting Israel. Doesn't matter what they do. More ecocide. We'll have fracking no matter what. More neoliberalism. With her brother-in-law, Tony West, as her chief advisor. The Uber General Counsel. So we did get promises from both sides. I think that some of the promises that the Republicans made were better. She never said she was going to fight for health care for all. She said just the opposite. When she was asked about making housing affordable, she said, oh, I love our small businesses. I mean, that was her actual answer. I love our small businesses. When a woman said, hey, my husband and I are living with his family. We're in our late 20s. We're hoping to have a home by now. We can't afford it. What's your plan? Oh, I love small businesses. So I get it. Politics is really, really, really hard in this country. And it is designed, the whole system right now, the way the Supreme Court, the way the political parties, the major parties have set everything up, makes it almost impossible for anyone but the Democratic Republicans to win. But what choice do we have but to fight against them? And I'm not asking that question rhetorically. I'm dead serious. What choices do we have? I hear people say, well, we don't have any other choice. We only have a choice between Democrats and Republicans. So the Democrats must be good because the Republicans are so bad. I find that a very strange argument. If you were in Poland in 1940 and someone says, well, our choices are Hitler or Stalin, so because Hitler's so bad, Stalin must be good. No, Stalin was really bad too. I don't understand it. You can have two bad options. That's why we have to go for a plan C. Okay, I have been on this. I've been accused of being a transphobe, and who knows? Maybe I don't. I have to. I don't. You know, I don't really think I am a transphobe, to be honest with you. My only issue, honestly, with trans people, transgenderism, whatever you want to call it, the movement, there are a couple of issues. One is I just really believe there should be female-only spaces. I just do. I mean, maybe if I was a woman, I wouldn't feel so strongly about that. But I'm bigger, I'm stronger than most women. Most men are bigger and stronger than most women. And I'm not a big or strong person by any means. And I know there are plenty of women who are bigger and stronger, or who are stronger than I'm, not so many who are bigger. Plenty who are stronger. I think women need female-only spaces. I think that's really important. I don't accept that a trans woman is the same as a biological woman. They're not the same. There are meaningful differences. And I think one of the most important female-only spaces should be sports because of the very differences between biological males and females I just mentioned. And I don't care. You can say all you want. Well, when we, hormone treatment and this and that, and pre-adolescent transitioning, and there's no advantages anymore. Well, maybe there aren't. I don't know. But the whole point of female-only spaces is so that females, women, and girls can compete just against other women and girls. And you are clearly changing that dynamic. We've seen it when you open up athletic competition, competitive sports that were previously reserved for females to women who are not female, to girls who are not female. So that is a big problem for me. I don't support that. I think it's wrong. I'm against it. And I do think, locker rooms, and I made the point, I think bathrooms should be based on what you are currently carrying around with you. So if you are a pre-op trans girl or a pre-op trans woman, you use the men's room, or you use, and what we should have more of, to the extent it can be done easily, affordably. I recognize small businesses may be in a different position, but yeah, to the extent we can, without putting undue burden on small businesses and other purveyors of services and goods, have a unisex or non-gendered bathroom, fine. That's good. Let's do that. But otherwise, use the bathroom that comports with your current physiological condition. Pre-op, use the bathroom of your sex at conception, period. I don't think that's that much to ask. I really don't. I don't think that's so unfair. This, I think, is totally wrong. No, there should not be a ban on transgender military members. They're human beings. They're people. They've demonstrated transgender people have served our nation honorably in the military. There's no reason they can't. This is just discrimination, pure and simple. It's bias, pure and simple. And I was thinking about, now, you know, if you're an officer, I don't know if this is completely true, but my understanding is pretty much all officers have their own quarters. You have your own room if you're an officer. Maybe you have to share, maybe, but I don't think so. Depending on the base, there probably are some places where officers have to double up. Obviously, if it's a wartime situation, you know, all bets are off. But to the extent that you have a transgender enlisted person and, you know, they have to be in barracks, okay, I get there might be some discomfort, so you can have a small area of barracks that are set up for trans people. To the extent there might be an issue, you could do that. And I understand they may not want to be sequestered. I get that. People don't like to feel like they're different. They're being treated differently. But, you know, you don't have, as far as I know, there aren't co-ed barracks, right? Women in the military are in their own barracks and men are in their own. So you could have probably there are such a small number of transgender service people. It's about 0.2% apparently. So 2 out of 1,000. It's pretty small. This is easily addressed. And what the argument was made by a transgender, I guess, officer, right? Because they were, I think it's a she, I believe. She's flown about 60 successful missions. The argument was made, and I think there's no doubt about this, that there's no legitimate reason in terms of defending our country, in terms of our security, to keep transgender people out of the military. It's just not right. It's just totally wrong. This is, you know, the kind of stuff that I think is a good argument against Trump. A very good argument, actually. There's just simply no threat to national security when you allow transgender people to serve. And not only is there no threat, but actually we're safer if we allow transgender people to serve openly for 2 reasons. One, we get the benefit of competent, patriotic Americans and people from other countries too. You don't have to be an American to be in the U.S. military. We get their benefit. Get the benefit of their experiences and their wisdom and what have you. So that's a good thing. There's another reason. This was often used to justify, and rightly so, the decision to allow gay people to serve openly in the military, which is when you don't allow people to serve openly and then many will be in the closet, right? A lot of gay people were in the closet who were in the military. It's not like they weren't there all the time before, you know, well, Clinton had his don't ask, don't tell, which was not successful. But up until there was a recognition and openness to allowing gay people to serve, a gay person was at risk, if they were outed, of being discharged, dishonorable. Their life ruined. You're a 15-year officer. You're getting close to retirement. Somebody outs you, your life's ruined. So you could be pretty easily targeted for blackmail. This was something that happened in England when homosexuality was illegal up until the early 1960s. There's a movie about that. I think it's called Slander, I think, or Libel. I'm not sure. Libel, Slander, I don't know. With Dirk Bogarts. Good movie. I think it was a great movie. It was a good movie. And because it was illegal to be gay in the UK, there was blackmail. If you were a bookstore owner in that movie, you could be blackmailed. It was terrible. People were killed. People committed suicide because they were afraid they would be outed in a profoundly homophobic society. Well, the same holds true for trans service people, because some may not be known as trans. They may be serving not openly. You'll say, oh, how could you not know? Well, I saw a picture of a family friend, and I was asked, there were several people in the photo, who's the trans person in this picture? I couldn't do it. You always see the funny memes like where someone clearly is like a man in a dress, right? With a mustache. Like, well, of course, that's the guy. But one can't always clearly identify somebody as trans. And a lot of time people make mistakes. We shouldn't be trying to identify people as trans. We should just live your friggin' life. Don't worry about whether the person on the subway next to you is, or you know what, if you're in the bathroom and you're using a stall, does it really matter when you come out if you're a woman, if there's a somewhat masculine looking woman doing her makeup? Is that really so problematic? I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. I wouldn't think it is. So yeah, go ahead and live your life. Now, I take a different tack when it comes to locker rooms and people are staring at each other. I take a different tack when it comes to sports, when there are a limited number of spaces, and transgender girls and women may take spaces from biological girls and women. They do. I take a different take. But best policy, yeah, for individuals, don't ask, don't tell. If you don't need to tell me. If you want to tell me what your sexuality is, go ahead. I mean, I don't generally need to know. And certainly, it's not up for people to ask. But when it comes to the military, you can serve openly. Somebody says, well, they're gay. All right. That's nice. Thank you for telling us. This is a really, really bad thing that Trump's doing. It's not as bad as defending genocide or promoting genocide. That's worse. But this is still really, really bad. We need to go in a very, very different direction. I would close the program by saying this. I doubt there's going to be a lot of some Democrats will complain, but plenty won't. All right, I will be back tomorrow for the free-for-all. I hope you all have a great afternoon. Thanks for watching, clicking on Halitics. And last imploration, is that a word? I implore you, please do subscribe. That's what I really want. More and more subscriptions. We had a little jump and then it's kind of flattened out again, which I'm not happy about, of course. So let's get more people subscribing to Halitics. See you tomorrow.